The rain hammered against the windows of David Chen's downtown apartment like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be heard. He had just poured himself a glass of wine after another grueling 14-hour shift at the hospital where he worked as a cardiac surgeon when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's fury. A weak knocking at his door. Then silence. Then a heavy thud that made his heart stop. David rushed to the door and flung it open. What he saw would haunt him forever. A young woman lay crumpled on his doorstep, her pale face pressed against the cold concrete, her body curled protectively around a bundle wrapped in a thin pink blanket. Rain soaked through her clothes and pooled around her, but it was the baby's cry that pierced through everything else. A desperate, hungry wail that spoke of neglect and fear. He dropped to his knees beside them, his medical training kicking in instantly. The woman was barely conscious, her lips blue, her breathing shallow. He checked her pulse. Weak but present. The baby couldn't have been more than 3 months old, her tiny face red from crying, her body shivering in the inadequate blanket. David scooped them both up and carried them inside, kicking the door shut behind him. He laid the woman on his couch and wrapped the baby in his warmest throw blanket before calling 911. While he waited for the ambulance, he tried to wake the woman, gently patting her cheek and calling to her. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and glazed with fever. She reached up with a trembling hand and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her cracked lips moved, forming words he had to lean close to hear. "Take care of Emma. Please, you're the only one who can." Then her eyes closed again and she went limp. The paramedics arrived within minutes and rushed her to the hospital. David followed in his own car, still holding the baby who had finally stopped crying and fallen into an exhausted sleep against his chest. At the emergency room, they tried to separate him from the child, but he refused. Something in that woman's desperate plea had awakened a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. The woman's name was Rachel Morrison. She was 26 years old and suffering from severe pneumonia and malnutrition. She had no identification on her except for a worn driver's license and a single photograph tucked into her jacket pocket. When David finally got to see it, his hands began to shake. The photo showed Rachel smiling radiantly, her arms around a man David recognized immediately. It was him, but he had never seen this woman before in his life. Over the next 3 days, Rachel drifted in and out of consciousness while David took emergency leave from work to care for baby Emma. He bought formula, diapers, and everything a newborn needed. He rocked her through sleepless nights and sang off-key lullabies his own mother had once sung to him. Each time he looked into Emma's dark eyes, he felt a connection he couldn't explain. Social services had been notified, but David had managed to convince them to give him temporary custody while Rachel recovered. He was a respected surgeon with no criminal record and a stable home. They agreed to a short-term arrangement. When Rachel finally woke up fully, David was sitting beside her hospital bed with Emma sleeping in a carrier next to him. Rachel's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw her daughter safe and cared for. "Why did you come to me?" David asked gently. "Why my door?" Rachel's voice was hoarse but steady. "Because Emma is yours." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. David felt the room spin. That was impossible. He had been in a committed relationship with his girlfriend Jennifer for 3 years. Before that, he had been careful, responsible. There was no way he could have a child he didn't know about. Rachel must have seen the denial in his eyes, because she reached for her purse on the bedside table and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were documents, medical records, and a letter explaining everything. She had worked as a nurse at a fertility clinic 2 years ago. There had been a terrible mistake, a mix-up in the lab. David's genetic material, which he had donated years earlier when considering helping a friend with fertility issues, had been accidentally used in Rachel's treatment when she had undergone artificial insemination as a single woman wanting to become a mother. The clinic had discovered the error too late and had been trying to cover it up. Rachel had only learned the truth during her pregnancy when she demanded to see her donor files after experiencing complications. She had tracked David down, but by then her life had fallen apart. She had lost her job due to the pregnancy complications, then her apartment, and finally her health. "I didn't know what else to do," Rachel whispered. "I knew you deserved to know about Emma. I knew she deserved a chance at the life I couldn't give her anymore." David felt like he had been hit by a truck. He looked at the sleeping baby, then back at Rachel's exhausted, desperate face. He stood up and walked out of the room without a word. For 2 hours he walked the hospital corridors, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of scam. He called his lawyer, who advised him to get a DNA test immediately before making any decisions. He called Jennifer, who broke down crying, and accused him of lying about his past. He sat in the hospital chapel and stared at the stained glass windows, searching for answers that wouldn't come. But every time he thought about walking away, he remembered that moment on his doorstep, Rachel collapsing in the rain, using her last ounce of strength to protect her baby. He remembered Emma's cries and the way she had curled against his chest, finally safe. He remembered the photo in Rachel's pocket and her desperate eyes. The DNA test took 3 days to process. 3 days during which David continued to care for Emma while Rachel slowly regained her strength. 3 days during which he watched Rachel interact with her daughter with a love so pure and unconditional it made his chest ache. 3 days during which he realized that biology wasn't what made someone a parent, love was. When the results came back, David sat alone in his apartment holding the envelope. His hands shook as he opened it. The words on the page blurred together at first, then came into sharp, devastating focus. Probability of paternity 99.9%. Emma was his daughter. The truth didn't fill him with joy or pride. It destroyed him. It shattered every certainty he had built his life upon. His relationship with Jennifer ended that night. His carefully planned future crumbled. He had spent his entire life in control, making calculated decisions, building a perfect career and a perfect life. And now a 3-month-old baby girl and her dying mother had turned everything upside down. But as David held that piece of paper, something else happened. He thought about his own parents, immigrants who had worked 3 jobs, each to give him opportunities. He thought about the countless patients he had saved, the lives he had fought for in the operating room. He thought about the oath he had taken as a doctor. First, do no harm. He returned to the hospital the next morning and found Rachel crying softly while holding Emma. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, clearly expecting him to deliver the final blow, to walk away now that he had proof. Instead, David sat down beside her and spoke words that surprised even himself. You're going to get better. We're going to figure this out together. Emma needs both of us. Over the following months, David helped Rachel recover and rebuild her life. He used his connections to help her sue the fertility clinic for the error that had devastated her life. The settlement was substantial enough to ensure Emma's future and Rachel's stability. He helped her find a new apartment close to his own and a job at a different medical facility. They developed a co-parenting arrangement that was unconventional, but filled with respect and genuine care. Jennifer had left, but David discovered he didn't miss the relationship as much as he thought he would. His life had changed, but it had gained a depth and purpose he had never experienced before. Emma grew into a happy, healthy toddler who split her time between 2 homes filled with love. Rachel bloomed back into health and confidence, forever grateful for the kindness David had shown when he could have simply turned away. And David learned that the most important decisions in life weren't the ones you planned, but the ones you made when faced with someone else's desperate need. 2 years after that rainy night, David stood in family court as a judge officially recognized his paternity and formalized their custody arrangement. Rachel stood beside him, healthy and smiling, while Emma babbled happily in his arms. They weren't a traditional family, but they were a family nonetheless, built not on romance or conventional bonds, but on compassion, responsibility, and the choice to show up when it mattered most. The DNA test results had destroyed the life David thought he wanted, but they had built something better in its place. A life with meaning, a life with purpose, a life where a little girl would grow up knowing she was loved by 2 people who chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard. Sometimes the greatest acts of kindness don't feel heroic in the moment. They feel terrifying and overwhelming. But when we choose compassion over convenience, when we open our hearts to unexpected responsibilities, we discover that being destroyed and being rebuilt can be the same beautiful process. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Kindify Stories for more tales of hope, compassion, and the incredible power of human kindness. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that even in our darkest moments, choosing love over fear can transform everything. Because in the end, family isn't just about blood or DNA. It's about showing up, especially for those who have nowhere else to turn.